All right, welcome back, you guys, to Crossroads of Thought podcast. My name is Frank,
And my name's Ariel.
and then, guys, if you guys are unaware, so pretty much this podcast, the main focus is to enable intellectual conversation from potentially contrasting ideas. I know we both sometimes might agree on some stuff. Sometimes we
Disagree.
don't. We disagree.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the main focus for this podcast. For this week's episode, we're gonna focus on border security.
Yeah, and so we went ahead and, under the topic of border security, we went ahead and sort of are focusing on three things. So just listing off the questions, like we went ahead and asked, like we talk about the current administration labeling the cartel as a terrorist organization. So we go ahead and talk about that and sort of what it implies. Moving on to question 2, we go ahead and talk about reformation in terms of immigration into the United States and what that looks like and what are possible solutions, and for those who are illegal immigrants, what can be sort of done with those who are already here. And then for the last one, we go ahead and talk about what the current infrastructure looks like for immigration. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy.
Yep, and then last thing, we're gonna do a quick discretionary notice. So the views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guests, and do not reflect the views, policies, or positions of any organization, company, or employer we may be affiliated with. The content is for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered professional or legal advice. Listener discretion is advised. Okay, you guys. So for the first, topic or subtopic, so it's going to be the United States designating cartels as a terrorist organization. Some of the questions we came up with is, so what are your overall thoughts? What are some implications? Should we do this? Why are we doing this? Those are some of the questions we came up with. So first off, so what's a terrorist organization? So a terrorist organization is typically defined as a group that uses violence, intimidation, or threats to pursue political, religious, or ideological goals, often targeting civilians. So in the U.S., we got several moving pieces when placing an organization as a terrorist organization. You have like the U.S. Department of State, Department of Treasury, the U.S. Department of Justice involved, and I'll go a little bit over what they do. I feel like it's good background information. So the Department of State maintains a list of foreign terrorist organizations. The Treasury freezes assets, also bans financial transactions. And they both then fully work with the Department of Justice for legal and criminal enforcement. That's kind of how they all mesh together. So initially, my thoughts, just based on what I know without any doing further research, I initially thought it was not a good idea, mostly in the sense of I fear escalation. So for example, in my head, this kind of sounded like us wanting to put boots in the ground in Mexico, trying to potentially do raids on specific targets, while also going against Mexico's own sovereignty. That was more of my concern. So I did some further digging around to figure out exactly what does that mean, because I feel like sometimes in the media, at least for me, it sounds like, oh shoot, we're going to be sending our special operations to go in there and basically get the job done without the host country's permission, sort of deal, kind of Wild West gung-ho sort of deal. So that was kind of how I thought of. So that was my main concern. But then I did a little bit more research, and then legally speaking, so the U.S. can and in the past has conducted raids in foreign nations. However, it takes a lot of legal, diplomatic, and strategic considerations For example, you need to get host nation consent. You also have the UN or international coalition mandates. Also, Article 51 of the UN Charter. Even though countries are generally prohibited from using force under international law, they retain the right to defend themselves. Countries can act in self-defense without waiting for UN approval if they are subject to armed attack. Self-defense can be somewhat murky. So, for example, preemptive strikes and preventive strikes. So that was a point of contention of kind of a gray zone sort of type of area. But furthermore, the threat must be specific, credible, and imminent to basically use force as an initial means. So with that in mind, I don't think the United States is going to be doing any of that, particularly because I don't think the current administration and then Mexico's administration, they don't really see eye to eye. So I don't see how Mexico would give permission to the United States, especially militarily, to go in there and help them clear out these cartels. I don't see that happening. So what does that mean? So for me, if anything, it's just going to be an addition. As far as labeling them as a terrorist organization, I think it's more of an additional weapon or even a tool. I'm not sure how effective it will be. I'm thinking it's more of a countermeasure. So, for example, by targeting specific individuals, especially leaders or associates of these cartels, but now labeled as a terrorist organization, that may potentially put additional pressure on them. Also, disrupting money laundering operations, especially now that there's an added emphasis towards these type of organizations. Now they're terrorists. I think that's going to put an additional agency and added pressure. I also think psychologically speaking, it's going to have an effect. So increased paranoia for cartel leaders, especially with the stigma of being placed in the same list as Al-Qaeda or ISIS. That may have some effect with new and current relations with political, business, and financial collaborations. And then as far as like the Mexican government, potentially there might be the need for them to crack down on cartels just to avoid potential fallout with the U.S. And that could be, kind of like the whole trade war, that sort of deal. That could be by fallout as an example. As far as other potential implications that may happen, so cartel members, they may act more, they might have more of a defiant mentality, especially if let's say they embrace this terrorist label kind of as a badge of fear or power. This might embolden them with increased violence. And then I added this as kind of a but as a tangent in history that I was able to see. So apparently back in Colombia, the FARC, the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia. So this organization, they used to be seen more as a organization who were trying to fight for their rights, but at some point they were designated as a terrorist organization, and so they were involved in drug trafficking, kidnappings, and violent insurgency. So the U.S. and Colombia, in coordination, they froze assets, targeted financial networks, and they disrupted drug routes. And then the FARC, they pretty much escalated their attacks. They became even more entrenched in their tactics, such as bombings, kidnappings, and even assaults on military targets. So that's kind of a parallel as far as if this has happened or similarly, even though it's not the exact same thing. I guess as far as escalation, maybe that is something that might happen with the cartels or some of the cartels, especially now if they are seen in such a way. Lastly, for the why are we doing this? So I think it falls into this current administration stance on getting tougher with immigration, on top of trying to lock down and secure the border, cartels, I think they're lumped into it, right? You have coyotes who smuggle over illegals, and who gets paid by these coyotes? It's mostly going to be cartels, right? They cartels mostly, they own a lot of the drug and human smuggling routes. Like if you want to illegally cross over from the Mexican side to the American side, more than likely it's going to be cartel owned. So I feel like by extension, they are sort of caught into this massive web of a tougher stance on immigration. That's kind of sort of my thoughts.
Okay, so refocusing the question to me, what are my thoughts and what are the implications of the U.S. labeling the cartel as a terrorist organization? As of this moment, the cartel is yet to be labeled as a terrorist organization. It will be the U.S. State Department who ultimately recommends that an entity be labeled as a foreign terrorist organization or an FTO. Some of the entities on this list that Frank had already mentioned would be Hamas and Al-Qaeda. What makes this more of a unique situation, though, is that Mexico is, if not the biggest, one of our biggest trading partners. So there's a relationship there that we have with them that we kind of want to, in my mind, go ahead and keep. So below, I have a chart here and shows that Mexico, at least in 2023, was the number one trading partner in that term in net of imports and exports, the net value. So continuing from there, though, I'm not opposed to the labeling of the cartel as a terrorist organization. I think there's a lot of things that the cartel does that labels them as such. However, with that said, I am concerned of the escalation that will come with it. During the time that this was being researched for this episode, the cartel opened fire at Border Patrol along the Texas border, and I think that sort of kind of reflects that this was done after Trump's announcement of his executive order, and I think this is sort of indication of growing tensions. So with that said, one of the administration's goals is to bring back manufacturing to the U.S. By labeling the cartel as a terrorist organization, it disincentivizes companies from having trade with Mexico. Why? One of the consequences of labeling an entity as a terrorist organization is that it is legal to provide material support to the organization within the United States. This new classification of foreign terrorist organizations would have far-reaching implications. U.S. companies who have manufacturing, for example in the U.S., make payments to those U.S. companies that are doing the manufacturing. It is likely that some of these companies are affiliated in some capacity with the cartel or cartel members. These U.S. companies may have to pay additional penalties for being associated with the cartel. With how broad the terms are for providing material support, U.S. farmers who use Mexican labor for their workforce may also feel this. This is due to the fact that many of these workers send money back home, or some of their family members have ties to the cartel. So, summing up, there's going to be some disincentives with trading with Mexico, and for better or for worse, this I think is going to have some negative impacts in our relationship with Mexico. With the cartel being labeled as a terrorist organization, do you think it's going to be a net positive for the United States?
I think it's kind of hard to tell.
It is.
See, it could be beneficial if we had the Mexican administration working
in cooperation.
I think it would reap much better benefits. I don't think it's going to happen if it stays at its current state, and also I don't know the whole situation as far as how good is the relationships between the current U.S. administration and Mexico's administration. I don't know how it is. I heard it's pretty icy.
Specifically recently with also the tariffs that just got passed, but we talked about that 2 weeks ago. So I think right now it's icy or rocky at best. I think they would be cooperative if this gets labeled as a terrorist organization. But I do think we're sort of forcing Mexico's hand to go ahead and face this issue. And I think this is more of a thing of we are going to get if this escalates to violence, the United States is going to be taking a lot of the blame for that in Mexico. And I don't think we necessarily we're forcing them to resolve their issue, and I don't think we're going to get thanked for that.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, so as far as what I can see as some positives coming from this is, it's kind of like, hey, you have this problem, right? You have this problem with all these organizations, right? They're not the very best of people, right? They're within your own country. Maybe you guys do something about it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of forcing their hand, right? And I feel like with that, by forcing their hand, hopefully that'll cause them to address, their big issue is cartels within Mexico. But with that, it's going to come with a lot of headache and heartache. Because I really doubt these cartel organizations are gonna just roll over and be like, yeah, sure, we'll work with you.
No, yeah, I don't. And the thing is, they're an organized organization to a certain extent, right? They have relationships with a lot of different countries that they go ahead and export drugs to. But there's also a lot of part of the cartel being so powerful in Mexico is that it sort of results in a lot of corruption. I think it helps that the United States military or that we're backing up the Mexican government. But I can't imagine this not ending in violence. I think that there will be a lot of there's going to be a lot of violence on both sides.
Violence in what way? Like, you mean?
Well, I think the United States is going to go after the cartel, but I think the cartel I think the cartel will retaliate. And I don't know exactly how they're going to do that.
If for example we, if we were to capture a high profile person in the United States.
No, in Mexican borders.
See, assuming we get permission, assuming we get through all that legwork, and then we're working in conjunction with the Mexican government, hey, you guys are authorized to do so, as long as if they can get those parameters fixed. I think for sure. I think that's a certain as far as them kind of being retaliatory.
Yeah, and I don't see this issue being solved without us going in to help. Maybe U.S. strikes would be an option, but I don't imagine the Mexican government would be very happy with that. So then that leaves us with sending in troops, because I don't think the Mexican government on its own, if they had the military strength to go ahead and take on the cartel, I think they would have already done it. But because of the amount of sway and corruption that currently exists and the amount of violence that the cartels go ahead and inflict on elected officials, there's a lot of fear there, and I think the United States military would have to get involved if this is something that they're looking to go ahead and fix. But if they're just labeling it as a foreign a terrorist organization, it might just be that we're just labeling it them that way, and it goes into sort of what I was talking about of bringing back jobs into the United States, of bringing in, having companies not use the Mexican economy to go ahead and like use them for manufacturing or anything like that, because there would be penalties involved for using Mexico as their plant. So yeah, I don't think this is going to be necessarily net good for the United States.
Yeah, and I think ultimately this is just based out of the, like I said, the current administration stance on immigration just kind of being tougher. And I feel like this is just a byproduct of like, okay, we have to be tough on this whole thing. So cartels, I think that's kind of like I said, by extension, it's also part of it. And I think it also, in a way, maybe they're thinking by this extension, it's going to force Mexico's hands to basically do something to potentially confront that issue, especially since if we do designate it as a terrorist organization, that comes with a lot of potential implications, especially if you're the host nation and on paper you have terrorist organizations under your country. That might not bode well, especially like in the international stage.
Yeah.
So there's that as well.
Did you see that some cartel members shot back at Border Patrol on the Texas border?
I didn't see the video or anything. I heard about it on the news.
Okay,
like,
so you didn't hear about it?
Yeah. Did you see the video or did you?
I saw a few seconds about it. Like I saw or at least I think it's been a week or so. But I thought I saw a video, but I can't remember at this point. But I saw the news news report about it, and this was after the executive order, and like in my mind, it has to be in response to
connected to that,
to the executive order. I went ahead and looked. I'm sure there's incidents of the cartel shooting at Border Patrol, but I don't think it's that common.
Yeah.
And then for it to happen right after the executive order, I don't think it might not be like from the top, but it might just be a reactionary message from that one guy or group of cartel members. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens on the border.
And I think you also touched on it. I think overall the big issue is like rooting out the corruption and how that leads into Mexican politics. That pretty much then leads into all matters within Mexico. Like, if I always say this, if you're able to bribe a cop, a regular cop, if you're able to bribe them with, let's say, $20, you get pulled over, right? And you're able to bribe your way out of it at that level. I think that speaks volumes to everything else. Like, same thing with your doctor or whatever it might be. I think that's the root. That's the ultimate issue I feel that needs to be addressed. It's kind of like,
and I agree. Why are we putting our hand in this?
Yeah,
it's like I agree that Mexico, I think, needs to figure this out. But now we're forcing them, or at least we're trying to force them to go ahead and face this level of corruption, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think if anything, what will eventually happen is we're probably getting they're going to be on the table and they're going to discuss, and I think what ultimately may happen is come to some sort of agreement of like, hey, I think we've talked about this one time, is have some of Mexican troops patrol the border just for added security.
Yeah.
Maybe create a sort of a buffer zone, or kind of similar to North and South Korea, that like a DMZ. Maybe not to that extreme, but potentially just have more security on the border on the Mexican side. So maybe that helps deter cartels from at least the whole smuggling aspect of humans.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's gonna come out of it.
there's
not a whole transformation, I should say.
Yeah, no. And I think that's I remember us talking about that, and I think that would help, right? Like anything with getting cooperation from the Mexican government, I think is good. It's also just a thing of realizing that information is probably getting to the cartel. And,
oh yeah, for sure.
It's if things escalate where the United States starts taking action, I think there will be a violent escalation.
Yeah, it's like kind of like how I provided an example, like the FARC, the FARC in Colombia, like that one. So that one is a very similar or parallel time
situation,
in history.
yeah.
Yeah, because it was kind of very similar. It was during the time when the whole Medellin cartel, like when it's being formed. It's kind of happening around the same time. And same thing, it's kind of like we designated the FARC as a terrorist organization, and then we were working in conjunction with the Colombian authorities to basically identify like these different networks.
Yeah.
And then we were working alongside with them, and then same thing. We're kind of going in there, helping them take them out, provide them information, but also that also emboldened a lot of the FARC to do more attacks. They started to do more bombings. They basically were escalating, especially with a further magnifying glass on them, to kind of show back, hey, no, we're still fighting back against you guys, and making it bigger. So I think the retaliation aspect, I think that would happen.
So do you think the end goal here is to solve Mexico's cartel problem, or do you think it's to go ahead and disincentivize our companies working with Mexico? Or do you think something else?
No, I think it's something else. I think ultimately, in my head, I think it's trying to come up with some leverage trying to leverage yourself into much better negotiating position, and part of it will be security. I think that's what the underlying goals over all this is, trying to come up with a better negotiation, and then you're gonna just want security. I think that's the biggest thing. Is
and what
security.
Would we be using against them? Like, hey, go ahead and add more security on the border, or we'll go ahead and start striking? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
No, kind of like well, if you're unable to keep hold of your on your side of the border, where we know there's we now with added resources, because maybe they're designated terrorist organization, we're gonna have different agencies go in there, and it'll have more of a spotlight on these places. So you probably collecting a lot of intelligence, and then
but that would be helping out Mexico.
But we would keep it. No, we would use that information of, hey, we have all this intelligence, all this stuff is going on. You guys are smuggling all these people. A lot of nefarious activity is going on here. We've told you guys multiple times to see if you guys can stop it. You guys can't stop it. You're causing all this. You're causing potential issues that's affecting us now, and we brought it once, twice. So we're gonna have to escalate it, right? And by escalating, it's like maybe for another 10% tariff.
But they didn't need to label it as a cartel. They don't need to do that in order to do what you're talking about. They can already do what you're talking about, from my understanding.
Yeah, very true. But I think I think this stems also from kind of like maybe sort of
virtue
not
signaling?
not extreme, but kind of like potentially that, but also like having, like I said, a strong, because I feel this administration just wants to have a tough stance on immigration, and I feel that's falling into the narrative of tough. We're gonna be tough on immigration. We're gonna tough. We're gonna make it strong. Like, I think it falls into that narrative. Yeah, we could go the diplomatic route of talking, but I think that's the underlying theme of like just having a tougher stance on things. I think that's why the whole labeling cartels as a terrorist organization. That's maybe the reason why, or that's the reason why we are kind of labeling in such a way. I may be wrong. I don't know.
So just to go back to the biggest difference that I saw when I was doing research for this between us labeling it and not labeling it is the ability to levy penalties with people, with individuals or institutions or entities that work or provide monetary support to these systems, and that's that's the only advantage I saw online of labeling them as such. So going after people's pockets who work with them, right? But like you said, it could very well just be a thing of trying to appear strong, and I think that there is merit in that. That, I imagine Trump would also do it just for that reason.
Yeah, I think that's a big aspect. And then, I mean, ultimately, I think it is going to cause some sort of obviously, I know I've seen some clips in which some people in the different, in other cartels, or at least in one video I saw, they asked this guy, "Oh, what do you think, with this labeling?" And the guy's like, "Oh, we're not really concerned. We're not concerned about this label, right?" But I think
I'm sorry, I missed that. You said, was this a cartel member that he?
Yeah, they were interviewing this cartel member. I don't know where he falls along the ranks of the organization, the hierarchy. But they pretty much asked, "Oh, what do you think about cartels being classified as such?" And he pretty much was like, "Oh, we're not really worried, Yeah. But I think I would argue on the psychological end, I think it does
create stress.
I think it is. It's gonna be there, even if you say, "Oh, we don't really care," but I feel like it's still gonna affect.
No, absolutely. There was an incident a couple years back where some American tourists were killed, and the cartel went ahead and came out and was like, "Hey, we didn't do this, and here are your guys," type thing, because they don't want to be on the other end of the American military complex. They don't want that. They just want to go ahead and continue business as usual.
Yeah, plus, I mean, it's kind of they know that it affects their pockets at the end of the day. If there's more fear, especially, we both know this as far as a lot of the big resort places, towns,
they're really
a lot of it. Yeah. A lot of it is cartel owned, or it's a lot of the money that they have very diversified portfolios. So they will buy a lot of nice properties and then rent them out to a lot of college students who are going out, to party at a popular destination.
Yeah.
So
I have no grounds for this, but I have to imagine that during this time, the cartel won't go ahead and go after American tourists.
No, I wouldn't think so, because I think at the end of the day, it's still hurting the bottom dollar. I feel at the end of the day, cartels are very all they care about is money. At the end of the day, so anything to protect their interests, if it means, hey, no violence, they're gonna try to avoid that as much as possible. But now
they're not known for that.
But now if we label them as such, maybe that kind of like removing the gloves.
Yeah.
Maybe that begins to kind of peer its ugly head. But I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll see.
We'll see.
Cool, man.
Okay. Moving on to the next question, or the next subtopic. What is reformation? What does that look like? What are your thoughts on a solution for current law-abiding illegal immigrants who should be allowed to remain in the U.S., at least in our opinion? So I'm going to go ahead and provide some context to my answer beforehand, so bear with me for a minute. Today's immigration laws are a product of the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. During the 60s, this was during the Civil Rights era. At the time, immigration laws had a strong preference towards European immigrants. This act went ahead and removed that bias and instead set a focus of letting in those that were highly skilled workers and their family members. The limit of the amount of immigrants was set to 290,000. However, this quota only limited those immigrants that were let in, but did not include their family or extended family. So you had one immigrant that came in, and that goes towards the 290 quota, but their mom, dad, cousins, that did not go towards the 290 quota. This is kind of in reference to what is labeled as chain migration. So what happened was we started to see a huge increase because of this migration. Jumping through the decades, in 1970, legal migration increased to 370 per year, so way above the 290. 1980, 524,000 a year. By 1990s, it was over 1 million a year. It was during some of the 1980s and the 90s where we saw an increase in illegal immigration. So what laws can be changed to solve our immigration problem? This question was actually researched and answered during Bill Clinton's administration. Looking for a solution, Bill chose Barbara Jordan, a civil rights icon during the 60s and 70s, to conduct research to determine what should be done to resolve our immigration issue. He chose her since she had the appearance of moral authority because of her work in the civil rights era and making a testimony against Nixon during the whole Watergate situation. So he tasked her with this, and one of her statements towards the end of her research, she went ahead and said, "It is both a right and a responsibility of a democratic society to manage immigration so that it serves the national interest." Her commission recommended allowing 550,000 migrants per year to come in legally, with an emphasis on the term legally. With that said, she also stated that there should be a floor of 50,000 political refugees accepted per year. Along with providing a cap of the amount of immigrants to let in, she recommended to limit chain migration to the nuclear family, as well as create a system of checks using Social Security and driver's licenses that make it difficult for companies to employ people who are here illegally. So this would be sort of combat illegal immigration, companies who go ahead and use illegal immigrants to go ahead and provide cheap labor. Part of her concern for creating this limit was out of fear that if we didn't control illegal immigration, it would hurt the effort of immigration altogether. In her testimony to the House of Representatives in 1994, she said the following: "If we cannot control illegal immigration, we cannot sustain our national interest in legal immigration. Those who come here illegally and those who hire them will destroy the credibility of our immigration policies and their implementation. In the course of that, I fear they will destroy our commitment to immigration itself." For those that are here illegally, this is now my opinion, if they have been violent, have participated in theft, put others at risk of harm, or redistributed drugs, they should be deported. For those that have been here for years and have not done any of the above and show that they have become a productive member of society, in my mind, they should be allowed to stay. There should be an exemption made of those that have been here and contributing to our welfare for a few years. And so, in summary, I think it's a bit of a complicated situation. But those that are here in terms of legal immigration, I think there's some steps that should be taken for at least exceptions of who have been here for a long time and have not done anything that I had mentioned before.
Cool. All right, so to kind of go over some of the questions. So as what is reformation? What does that look like? What are your thoughts on a solution for current law-abiding illegal immigrants who should be allowed to remain in the U.S.? So for me, the way how I kind of think of things is, so for current illegal immigrants that are currently in the United States, I believe we can create a system in which they can stay as long as they meet a certain framework, and then this framework can be created with different requirements. So I kind of thought of one, very basic. I mean, there's a lot more that can be added to it. So, for example, no felonies. So, absolutely no felonies at all. Misdemeanors. So, all misdemeanors would have to be viewed upon a case by case basis, excluding non-criminal speeding citations, parking tickets. As an example, because I feel as a public sentiment or kind of a social norm is we all get speeding tickets every now and again, same with parking tickets. So I feel those can be kind of exempted. Furthermore, for some gray zone type of crime, so for example, piracy of digital content, I feel like that also is kind of a gray sort of zone area in which I don't think someone should, be severely penalized for piracy of digital content. Anyway, I do also think, as far as this overall system, we should also have a redemption system. So, if in the case that someone does something in that gray zone area, they fall under this redemption system where if they were guilty, kind of whether it be an interview process or whatever it might be, but if that person does have a willingness to change, if they actually have remorse, I feel like that would be that would qualify them kind of towards this path towards redemption. I know it can be subjective, but for me, I am a big believer in a person changing. So I think this redemption path, in my view, would be great. And as far as this path to redemption, what does that look like? So this could mean like paying fines, community service, placing that person in probation, also having them be part of different sort of rehab programs as well. I think that would be useful. I think also kind of potentially adding the aspect. I know they do it already for when you're towards the path to naturalization. I know you need to know certain things about the U.S. history, kind of more along the sense of just learning, maybe learning the language, kind of along those lines. Not saying that they need to learn English. It would be nice to at least have some of it, but maybe potentially adding an education aspect of some of the U.S. history that's involved, some of the social norms, to kind of potentially have them a bit more acclimatized. Even though we are a melting pot, I would still say the U.S. is still as a melting pot overall. Anyway, regarding all of the questions, that was the only one that I kind of focused mostly. I didn't do too much of a dive into the history aspect or so forth. I wanted to focus more on the actual solution for current law-abiding illegal immigrants. I wasn't super specific. There's a lot more we can get into, but that's kind of what I have so far.
Okay. So going back to the question, I liked what you were talking about in terms of solutions for those who are here illegally, who came here that weren't seeking asylum. I think that there are a lot of these individuals who are trying to make a change in their life, but I also understand that there's a need to go ahead and process them. I think one of the things that you and I have talked about, the concerns about having them come here illegally, we don't know their background. And so one of the things that I had written but I hadn't said is, at the end of the day, I think both immigrants who are looking to come here and U.S. citizens, we want to process these individuals. So I think creating more of a system that I'm not sure about the amount, but definitely creating a system that allows for people to go ahead and apply to come in, I think is necessary. I also understand political refugees is a big. I think I was like doing some research and it went ahead and said that part of the reason why there's this 50,000 floor number is, I guess we went ahead and were rejecting Jewish people during the 1930s and 40s who were fleeing persecution, and we rejected them. And so I think ever since then we've been trying to make up for that mistake. And so just being this example for the rest of the world of letting refugees in, I think it makes a lot of sense. So I'm open to that, but I also understand that there's a bit of a negative connotation. It's like, how many of these people who are fleeing prosecution are doing it because of persecution, whatnot. I know that was a big thing, but definitely allowing for those who are being persecuted to go ahead and come in.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, for those type of people, whether it be seeking for asylum or political reasons, like you mentioned, I think those for sure, those can be like a separate pot if it's able to split in that capacity, or maybe you've explained it already. So I apologize if you said it already. I think at least for the people that are currently here illegally, for those type of people, like I think
who aren't seeking asylum,
that just been here. I mean, this isn't a new problem. Like the U.S. has had illegal immigrants past this president, past multiple presidencies. So this isn't a brand new problem. If anything, it's further exacerbated by the media and also the advent of social media and the internet. Like you mentioned, as far as knowing a person's past, like someone who's in here illegally, what's further exasperated when you're focusing on this one person who was here illegally, is an illegal immigrant, but they have ties to MS-13, notorious gang, right? But that doesn't mean that's all of them, right?
Yeah.
I would hopefully think that the majority they're good people, they have good intentions, right? You're good.
Yeah.
But and in social media, you see that clip of this guy's an MS-13 gang leader, or this guy's wanted in his own home country for murder, or this guy's wanted for molesting a child. Like I feel like those parts you see mostly on the social media, so they resonate more. It's kind of like the whole thing of you resonate more with the negative stuff, because that's kind of, it's eyeballs, right?
It gets attention.
You kind of get entrapped into that. Overall, I think just trying to come up with some sort of system to help control or at least manage the current illegal immigrants, I think should be one of the first introductory or first steps overall.
How do you? So let's say that there's right now. I looked up the cap before we started. It was at $675 per year, right, for legal migration. Let's say we hit that cap. How do we stop those? How do we disincentivize illegal immigration besides deportation? Obviously, like, we can go ahead and deport them because you're here illegally. At the same time, I understand they're taking a risk and everything like that. But how do we disincentivize illegal immigration, right? Like, if we're trying to get them to follow the path of legal migration, a lot of times for illegal immigration, it's just a thing of opportunity. They're coming here for a better start. But what happens, or at least from what I was doing research on, a lot of times when they're like lower skilled labor, or at least a lot of times these people are lower skilled labor, and so they're competing with they're competing with minimum wage jobs that the lower members of our society or of the workforce are like trying to compete for. So by allowing illegal immigration in, they're having to compete with those positions. So I guess, how do we stop? Like, obviously Trump has his solution, right? He build the wall and deport. But I, like, from my understanding, part of the issue is that United States, in comparison to Mexico, has a strong economy that allows for a lot of jobs, and so because of that disparity in the economy, there's this huge push to go ahead and immigrate here, regardless of if it's legal or illegal, right? So at least from what I was reading, working with companies and creating a system that specifically eliminates or creates a system where it uses driver's licenses and social securities. They go into detail. I don't know exactly what it entails, but making it very difficult for companies to hire illegal immigrants to work here, I think makes a lot of sense. That sort of, even if you do get here, it's going to be very difficult. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that I don't think the wall is going to be as good of I don't think it's going to be as good of a solution as creating a system that stops companies from hiring illegal immigrants. So at the same time, if those illegal immigrants are here for a long time, I think it would be good to go ahead and create an exception, because at some point they become part of the community and they go ahead and are producing to the welfare of our society. They're paying taxes. If they've been here, not nothing set in stone, but if they were here for over 5 years and they never got caught, maybe we can create a system which allows, and they never got caught, never did anything that a citizen would do that's illegal, right? I could see making exceptions for those who went ahead and were able to avoid it and haven't done anything negative during that time.
Yeah, their grandfather onto this system, right? That is trying to be created, right? So it's kind of okay, let's say if you've been in the country, illegally for the last, let's say 5 years, right? And if you have a verifiable evidence that you've stayed at these certain residences, you haven't had any sort of crime, you don't have any tickets or citations, at that point maybe identifying some of those groups of people and then somehow placing them into this group, and then ultimately saying, hey, have any of y'all started the process towards maybe a green card or some type of visa or something at least, right? And if they haven't, then kind of okay, cool, this is this first step. We're going to go ahead and place you. You're already part of this group. We're going to work towards some sort of solution, right? But at least you're at least doing some work as far as identification aspect versus this sort of limbo that we're in. Is we don't know exactly what to do. What's the solution? Do you just deport everyone? They deport all illegal immigrants? Because I guess you can make the argument that, well, they broke the law, they're in here illegally, so thus they should be deported. But at the same time, it's in a way we also do need the labor, the jobs wise. There's going to be some market, I guess not market. There's going to be certain aspects of the economy which is heavily reliant upon illegal immigration, right? So I think we also need to take a look at some of those areas and see how it would be impacted, especially if we decide to remove a good chunk. So I feel a good research on the numbers wise of people in certain areas, how that would affect the economy. Not to say thinking purely from a numbers or statistical sense and taking it away from the human side of it, but I feel that is a good tool to have are good pieces of information to ultimately have.
Yeah.
So as far as figuring out what that number looks like, that sweet spot as far as how many should be
allowing that are illegal.
Yeah, and
versus...
also helping kind of break down the parameters, if you will, or the filter.
Yeah, and we also don't want to we don't want to incentivize illegal immigration too, right? We want people to go through the system. So creating that sweet number to also be reflective of, you can do it, but it's not going to be pretty. Like it's going to be rough. Like we'd much rather for everyone involved for you to go through the system that's set in place. That way there's, I don't know. Like I think that there's we want to create an incentive for people to follow the rules. We want an incentive for immigrants to use our system, to use their system so they can get processed. So we know who's coming in and people can follow the rules. That way there's not as much backlash if they're coming in here through immigration. From what I've heard, right? I've heard different numbers. I was looking online. The number of illegal immigration or immigrants currently here is, I've heard from 12 to 16 million. But then I also saw Marco Rubio said 25 to 30.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but there's he doesn't really have numbers to back that up. So I thought that was interesting. But from my understanding, there's been a lot of border patrol encounters, right? There's been I think you and I had talked about it, and there was 10 million encounters or something like that. But yeah, there's going to be an impact by there might be a strong, or prices might go up in terms of if we deport everyone for illegal immigration, right?
Yeah, no, so this is a random question that just popped up. So what do you think overall as far as, so right now the current administration, right? So at least from what I've heard, is the current strategy is to kind of go for, they're deporting kind of what they consider repeat offenders, right? Or offenders of a certain crime, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think of that? What do you think of that strategy?
That's when you say repeat offenders, you're talking about people who come in over the border repeatedly, they get deported and then come back.
So that could be one. So that's a good question. So based on what I've seen, some of the people that they've deported, for example, I did see one guy he had MS-13 affiliations.
Yeah.
I did see another person that he had a warrant for his arrest for murder from his home country. I saw another one in which he had physically assaulted a woman here in the U.S. Physically assaulted a woman on top of other crimes.
Yeah.
So I guess it is a broad range of crimes, but yeah. I think they're mostly going to be, at least from what I've seen, I don't think that they're your traditional, or not traditional, but very misdemeanors. It's mostly going to be heavier sort of crimes, at least from what I've seen. Or if they have a repeated history.
So I went ahead and so one of the things that it's kind of frustrating, what happens from how ICE deports immigrants is administration to administration. So that means that Trump created his memo on what ICE should be doing, and
so it changes all the time.
Every administration changes. In Obama's, it changed a couple of times. The way that it's worded right now, they are very heavily focused on criminal, but there's no exceptions made for the way it's worded. If you're here illegally, you're getting deported. And so I agree. But I speculate that right now we are seeing a lot of deportations of criminals, which makes a lot of sense. But as time goes on, we're going to start to see those who have been here for a while get deported, even though they've done nothing wrong. Technically, or at least in the eyes of Trump, they broke the law by coming here illegally, and for that reason, he will get deported, or that person will get deported, right? So I don't have a problem with deporting criminals. I think there's, based on what I'm doing with research, we don't want illegal immigration. It really hurts legal migration. But I think that having exceptions for those who've been able to make it here for a long time, creating some type of pathway to citizenship makes a lot of sense outside of just getting married to a U.S. citizen, or other, because like from my understanding, it's more difficult to become a citizen once you're here illegally. But yeah, one of the things that was interesting for the Obama administration, they had different priorities, right? So the priority one was threats to national security, border security, or public safety. So getting rid of that. Then priority 2 was misdemeanors and immigration violators. And then priority 3 was other immigration violators. So there was a hierarchy of, these are the guys we really want to focus on. These are the ones that we kind of want to focus on. And third is like, we will get to them when we get to them. And I think that that's more reflective of how I see it. It's like, I don't think we do need to, I think part of the Obama administration went ahead and saw the need for deportation. And I think Trump also sees the need for deportation. I think I am concerned as to the amount he's going to deport. I think the way he talks, mass deportation, part of me thinks that he's going to try and hit the 10 million mark. That's just my perspective, and that's concerning to me because there's going to be there's going to be hits on the economy for something like that, for that level.
For that large amount of people being deported.
Yeah, that'd be what? How if you deport 10 million? How much is that in percentage? 2%? 2% of the population? Something like that. Yeah, because it's like if we deported 4 million and there's 400 million, then that'd be 1%, right? So 8 million, like you're looking at a little more than 2%. Like we're talking about removing a workforce of like 2% of, maybe not 2% of our entire workforce, but we're looking to deport a good amount of our workforce here, and so that's going to have an impact on the economy.
So yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, I think for sure we need to iron out sort of like hopefully they can iron out, not me. Hopefully they can iron out a better strategy. I mean, well, I guess I am okay with the whole the targeting of these of illegal immigrants that have done
criminals, right?
Criminals of a certain degree. And you mentioned also about it's kind of a gray zone too of they can also target just illegal immigrants and also they can be deported as well. Actually, funny enough, the guy, I think the border czar they call him, he said it too. It's like right now the current aim is for these repeat offenders, right? But at some point, whenever they got most of them, they're gonna open up the aperture.
Yeah,
it's like they're gonna open up the aperture, and then it's eventually they're gonna go towards illegal immigrants. Like anyone who's in here illegally. Like he has said it.
So they're not necessarily trying to hide that fact. It's just continue.
So that is a thing I can see that for sure is that is going to happen. Hopefully, at least in my head, creating some sort of system that just recognizes people who have been here for X amount of years. They've done nothing but work, right? Try to climb towards what people call the American dream, right? Get a better life. But I mean, well, I guess we'll see if that happens. All right. So for our final questions, it's going to be, how does the immigration system work? How do they screen and process applicants? What is the overall process? What is the current infrastructure for immigration? and what can be done for immigrants to come in legally. So I will admit I did not put all my attention to all those questions. I kind of only specified certain ones. So I will only touch up mostly on the vetting process, which organization is responsible for a certain aspect of it. And then lastly, I'll give my opinion as far as what can we do for the immigration as a whole, as far as improvements from my point of view. Who oversees the immigration system? So based on what I was able to find out, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, so abbreviation being USCIS, is a federal agency responsible for overseeing lawful immigration to the U.S. Its main role is to administer and enforce immigration laws, process applications for immigration benefits, and ensure that those seeking to enter or stay in the U.S. meet legal requirements. So as far as the actual vetting process, I kind of already had an idea of what that looked like after doing a little bit of research. It's actually quite thorough, at least from what I was able to read. So people who are going through the process of immigration, they're subject to biometric screening, so the collection of fingerprints, signatures, and photographs. They then share that data with the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division, also the Department of Homeland Security. So with those two, they help verify the identity of the applicant, and they cross-check against databases to ensure that they have no criminal or potential security concerns. Furthermore, there's a lot more institutions or organizations that come into play. For example, ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They also are involved as far as an interagency collaboration, and then they basically are responsible for providing information on individuals who have overstayed their visas or committed immigration violations. The Department and State, they handle more of the based on the consulate, so for visas outside the U.S. So they will share that information along with these other agencies, and that kind of helps put everything together in the process as to whether or not maybe authorize a visa and so forth. Additionally, they even share some of the information with other databases. So, for example, the Interpol database and also a financial sanctions list. So, the Interpol database contains information of individuals who are wanted for international crimes. So they'll cross-check it through that database. Additionally, looking at a financial sanctions list, and basically the financial sanctions list, it checks for applicants that making sure that they're not financially linked to sanctioned entities or individuals. And then also, if needed, they can even do interviews. So the USCIS, they may require some applicants to attend an interview. So this is particularly common for green card applicants, also for asylum and for citizenship. And during that interview, they ask certain questions to kind of look at the overall credibility. They'll also ask security questions to make sure that they're not tied to any criminal or terrorist organizations. Also, even fraud protection. Or fraud prevention, just making sure that people aren't abusing they aren't abusing the immigration system in the sense of only marrying a certain person because you want to become a U.S. citizen. So they'll want to ask detailed questions to verify legitimacy. That's as far as what as I was able to gain from my deep dive into the whole vetting process. Deep dive, I don't know if is even the right word to be using. So lastly, as far as my opinion, so what can be done for the immigration system? What can we do for immigrants to come in legally? I know roughly there's over 20,000 USCIS employees. It ranges for what they do. Based on what I was able to find, there was approximately $5.8 billion budget for them. Based on stuff that I saw, that I guess there were a lot of arguments that they're severely under budgeted. So potentially increasing the budget, and then in addition, maybe hiring additional employees that are solely responsible for the whole intake process, and then also bringing in third parties who are good at creating processes and making them efficient. I'm a big believer in making effective decisions, not solely based out of convenience. I think that would be very important. I think that would help out the whole agency as a whole and in the immigration system. But yep, that's my take.
Okay. So going off of what Frankie said, or continuing the third topic, I'm gonna go ahead and discuss sort of the different ways to go ahead and get into the United States. So there's a few different categories that you can go ahead and classify yourself under. Family-based immigration. So if you have family here in the United States, you're able to go ahead and apply with them as your representative for when you come here. Another way is through employment-based immigration. From what I've heard in my industry, there's a lot of companies that go ahead and hire for that pathway, and through them you can go ahead and obtain the path to U.S. citizenship. One that was new to me was I guess we do a diversity visa lottery, where we go ahead and hold a lottery for those who have a low attendance rates that are applying to the United States. So there's that one that was new, or at least new to me. Other ones that we were just discussing were asylum and refugee. I will say I didn't realize that there was a difference between the two. That's interesting to hear. So, and then on top of that, you can also have like a fiance that you had been discussing earlier. So you go ahead and take one of these ways to go ahead and apply, and you can go ahead and come in. There's a few other ways, but I won't be getting into that right now. In terms of how long you can go ahead and expect to wait, like the process specifically for naturalization seems to be 18 to 24 months, but that's specific to when it goes ahead, and it seems like for when you're a resident, but before then, there's a current backlog of 3.6 million cases, and that takes it right now. There's an estimated wait of 5 years. So all in all, you're looking maybe not close to a decade. At least right here, you're looking at 7 years, but it might take more time. But yeah, in all honesty, I also didn't do too much, or at least I'll say that I didn't do too much research into this question. But yeah, I'll go ahead and leave it there with that. So I think one of the things that I had written down, and I'm not sure, in between, like, we go ahead and sometimes have conversations in between takes, and one of the things that we had discussed, and I can't remember if I said it here or off the record, was that both United States citizens and immigrants, I think, can come to an agreement that it's best if we go ahead and process their background information. I think that is a net good for everyone, and it seems like there's a decent vetting process from what you were talking about, from what you saw in your research.
Yeah, at least for me, the vetting seemed pretty. I mean, there's multiple agencies that are involved, there's a lot of checks, I feel. Granted, I don't know the effectiveness overall, but I mean,
if it's
at surface level, it looks like it's a pretty good vetting process. They seem to be checking so many of the resources that they have. So I feel in the sense of people who may be concerned that the vetting process isn't good, or maybe they have this view, especially currently, maybe now that maybe they're not sure how strong it is or if it's secure. I'd
just
say,
off of face value.
I think it's decent. I mean, like you mentioned, the huge backlog of cases. That definitely needs to get worked on. So and
it's a thing of that 3.6 million. I guess it's a thing of. I guess currently we're allowing in 675,000 a year, and if we have a backlog of 3.6 million, it's gonna take, just to get through the backlog, it would take upwards of 5 years to get through the backlog. So it would take a good amount of time. Do we need to increase that number? I don't know.
I know I was reading also that so a lot of these agencies, or at least that agency, the USCIS, a lot of them are beginning to use like AI tools.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully, not saying that AI is the answer, but
it might help.
That should at least help speed up some of the process. I guess maybe that's why I was kind of promoting the idea of bringing in a third party who are experts in they're just good at making processes more efficiently.
Yeah.
That could potentially be of good use, and then putting that into practice. I don't know the current process. I don't know how things are being done, but the fact of the matter is we have over 3 million cases already still waiting there. We still have people who are still wanting to come in here legally. The issue is there, so how do we go about addressing it effectively? Right? So in my mind, I guess I'm more of a proponent of figuring out some sort of system, bringing in experts who are they're good at that, so
making data-driven decisions.
Yeah, exactly. No matter how you feel about it politically, but the aim is to just make things efficiently or effective.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the things that you had mentioned before was it seems like they're under budget, or at least not under budget, but also specifically underfunded.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a thing of just getting, maybe not just getting you more employees, but it's also a thing of investing in AI tools, like you were mentioning too, bringing in third parties, spending money on that as an investment. Because if you have 10 employees and you have AI tools, maybe the 10 employees are enough. But maybe we also, at the same time, in addition to AI tools, we also just need more individuals who are going through these these amount of applicants.
Yeah, and then at least for the article that I was kind of reading off of, as far as it being under budgeted, their primary argument was going to be that they're under budget, so they can't hire as many people, and then also some of it is going into creating these AI tools, and then also some of it is they're working on very old legacy systems, and that's in order to update, it's going to cost a lot of money. So I know in certain parts they have updated, but at the same time, I think what they've been trying to balance, okay, if we update, we're not going to have that much budget for personnel. So I think they've kind of been teetering a balance of, hey, which one do we do? So I think that's at least that's what the article was stating.
What was the department or the agency that overviewed it?
The USCIS. So that is
Immigration System or Services.
Here. So the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. So that's there's actually a lot of there's a bunch of federal agencies that do different things, but I specified on this agency because apparently they're the ones responsible for overseeing lawful immigration to the U.S. And then that's, I guess, I'm assuming this is the agency responsible for all types of cases: asylum, visas, work visas, pretty much the whole gamut.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's whoever's in charge of the CIS. It makes sense to at least let whoever's in charge of it maybe. I'm going to show how little I know, but petition Congress or talk to the administration, to the current administration, of increasing funding for a year or two to go ahead and maintain the same personnel, or while using more or spending more money wisely to go ahead and invest into newer technology that gets them out of this legacy system that kind of slows things down.
Yeah, no. To be fair, I also don't know a whole lot, so I think on the surface level, it's a good idea, right? Especially if you know that if you make a $1 billion investment, but it's going to save you $10 billion throughout the course of 10 years. You're going to pay that high upfront cost, but on the long term, it's going to come back and save you. Sometimes it might not even save you money, but it saves you time, and that's what maybe for that organization is most important, is time, right? Because time is equal to the amount of people you have available to be doing stuff, right? So maybe seeing so much in a monetary sense isn't the right scale or the right value. So in that sense, it is time. Yeah. So, but I think I agree. I think so too. Yeah, I mean, we'll see what ends up happening.
I think that what's a little bit more difficult too, right, is to tell the American people, wherever this money is going to come from, that there's distrust in bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. To increase someone's budget right now is just, there's a negative connotation to any of that. How to go ahead and then say, like, hey, we need this money and we're not going to be using it stupidly. We're not going to be giving raises across the board or something like that. But sort of like creating that trust of, we need to go ahead and we're not going to save anyone money with this, but we're going to be saving a lot of time. Like, how at the end of the day does this help American citizens? By giving them more money, we can go ahead and process and do background checks on these individuals, and not, hopefully, ideally, what happens is we'll go ahead and see less illegal immigration. So that's one thing that could be a byproduct of this, sort of put it in, sort of showing the fuller context. It's not just raising money to go ahead and give money unnecessarily, but to go ahead and save time, and make this more of an efficient product at the end of the day. Yeah,
for sure. Shoot, I had something off the top of my head, but I think it's like a fleeting thought. It was going to be about, if I keep talking, it'll come to me.
We were talking about effectively using money and
okay. I remember now. So the thing that you're talking about as far as making the argument to hopefully bring money, for them to get an increased fund, and then for the public trust, and to, hey, this agency deserves a lot more money. The terrible aspect of that is that there are so many competing agencies that want to have more, that basically are competing for their existence. That's the thing too. I mean, it's like you always have all these other agencies. Hey, I deserve more money. And then there's a fixed amount of money, right? So
in our budget,
that'll be in the battle in itself, as far as what do we prioritize, right? But hey, if the administration really prioritizes immigration, at that point they will say, hey, this is a benefit. If we can get a good system, a good base overall, it's gonna help out our future, and it just makes us more effective overall. And we know who's coming in. We're vetting the people the right way. It's a streamlined process, and at least there's something versus the current system.
Yeah, where it takes upwards of 7 years to go ahead and go through the entire process and become a U.S. citizen. I've heard it's more than 7 years, but at least online, from what I'm seeing, it's like roughly 7 years. But it'd be much better if we can do this more quickly, but at the same time, efficiently.
Yeah, and granted, I don't know if this has always been an issue, like in the past. So take that with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
So
as everything on this podcast.
Yeah, man. Sometimes I'll be saying the most
crazy
crazy things, but I try to tone it down here, just because maybe you don't want to hear certain words. But anyway, I'll leave it at that.
It's good conversation for sure.
So, cool. Well, all right, guys.
I think with that, we're gonna go ahead and sign off for today.
Yeah, I think we're gonna wrap it up. So, well, thanks for listening, guys. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it.
Where can they find us?
They can find us in the popular applications, such as YouTube,
such
Spotify,
as the YouTube, the Spotify. I've heard of those.
Yeah, we're on most big
streaming platforms. Yeah, we're gonna make it big.
So, and we'll put that all information on there so y'all can find us. And yes, I did say y'all. I'm not from the South, but I do enjoy using the word y'all. That's pretty much it. And we'll see you guys
next time
on the next one.